we congratulate and thank everyone for taking time to be with us today. We are going to discuss something to do with resetting with COVID-19 pandemic. With us today is Seri Dr. Jemilah Mahmood, advisor to the Prime Minister. And then we have also Dato Seri Idris Jala, former minister. He is now heading PEMANDU Associate. He has a lot of experience in handling crisis. So let us take this discussion and discuss, I think, to the major points that we would like to address, which is resetting and what kind of resetting framework that is appropriate for all of us. I would like to read the book by Farid Zakaria. This is very interesting. United States alone devotes almost $750 billion to its defense budget every year, and yet we were unprepared to defend against a tiny microbes. It may well turn out that this virus will cause the greatest economic, political, and social damage to humankind since World War II. So this is very strong statement by Farid Zakaria. Therefore, I think it is appropriate for us to discuss about this issue. I think this is everyone's interest. I would like to start with Tan Sri Jemilah. What is your reflections of the year 2020, and in particular in relation to COVID from your perspective? To start with.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Dato Sri, Dato Zaini, Ujang. First of all, I think 2020 has come, unfortunately, as a shock to many. And I say unfortunately because it should not have been. We have had so many warnings that a pandemic of this nature was in the making, and yet we were continually unprepared and caught by surprise. And as Farid Zakaria mentioned as well, everyone in the health sector, in the international arena, has always been saying it was a matter of when and not a matter of if. As a result of COVID-19, we have now been at the very sharp end of a shock to a multi-system shock, which has not just affected people primarily who have been fallen sick and some who have unfortunately passed away, but also disrupted social lives, disrupted businesses, disrupted governments, and disrupted our entire global ecosystem. And I think that 2020 will be the year that a huge year of learning for all of us, a huge year of really trying to put together the best policies, the best response that we can have. But also a huge year that I hope awakens each and every one of us that without collaboration at every level, whether it is at national, regional, or global levels, we can't end this pandemic. No one is safe until everyone is safe. So, we are now entering 2021 with a totally expected another wave. And this has happened even with the Spanish flu. The first wave did not kill as many as the second wave. And again, a matter of anticipation that was obviously something we should have paid a little bit more attention to as well. So we plow on. We need to, at this point in Malaysia, my strong call is everyone now has to come together and work collaboratively to fight against this pandemic and protect our people, our economy, and our social systems.
Can I stop you there? As a member of the governments of Malaysia's Economic Action Council, you must have some inside knowledge about what's happening in the country. Do you think that we can improve shortly, or we have to wait for another months or quarters for us to get back to our growth trajectory?
I think it will. First of all, I think we've got to get this virus under control. That has to be the primary focus for now. Secondly, we've got to look at which economic sectors we can start to restart. I think we've got to, in a 1 year, we have learned so much about the virus. We know that it spreads through what we call super spreader events, which are mainly social. We know that without behavioral change, we will not be able to end the pandemic. We know that, there are certain things, for example, ventilation, wearing a mask, the 3 C's, the 3 W's that are clear and repeated by the health ministry. We know, for example, that without scaling up testing, without, making sure that we protect the most vulnerable groups, these things have to be put in place. And then restarting the economy in a safe way. We know, for example, where the disease hits, therefore, what extra measures we do and precautions do we need to take, and where the disease may be more easily controlled, and therefore what businesses need to start.
Okay. Dato Seri Idris, as a fix-it man, what is your take on 2020?
Well, 2020 has been the worst pandemic in our lifetime, without doubt. And it has impacted businesses, economies, governments, and everybody. If you look at some numbers, Dato Seri, COVID-19 has infected 100 million people in the world. 100 million people, 2.16 million have died as a result of COVID-19. In Malaysia alone, the number of people infected is 200,000. It's a lot of people from one disease. 707 deaths as of recorded. And our daily rates of infection has already reached all-time high of about 4,000 a day. So the world is really suffering. Many businesses are impacted. So to my mind, what has happened in the course of last year is this. As Tan Sri had mentioned, it's a huge shock to the system. And the system has a massive, multifaceted shock. And that's something that we were not prepared for. You are right that the theme of this session has to be a reset. Reset in strategy, reset in execution, reset in the way we collaborate. I think when we had this, there was not enough cooperation amongst countries around the world to learn from one another. It's a simple thing as learning from one another. And that was not happening. And there were people blaming one another. The WHO is there, but nobody is really reaching out to them to figure out how to pull things together. So I think there is a lot of reset in collaborative approaches in the world to deal with this. I would say today some businesses have collapsed. In Malaysia alone, last year, the government statistics shows that 30,000 or 34,000 small and medium companies have already closed down in Malaysia alone. This 34,000 is the numbers were official numbers up to October. So when you see that, and that's a massive challenge for businesses. So last year and continuing this year is a huge challenge for us to deal with this conundrum between health or the economy and businesses. That is a dilemma that we have to deal with. You cannot say, I'm going to focus on one alone. You've got to deal with both. And so I think this is a huge shock for everybody.
Dato Seri, you are very lucky. You are no longer CEO of Malaysian Airlines.
Oh.
You were CEO of Malaysian Airlines. I don't know how you will react to that. It's okay. We go to the core business of this webinar. Looking at the scenario, we were talking about planetary health. We were talking about how COVID-19 can spread very fast and how unprepared we were about a year ago when we heard about COVID-19. We thought it can be contained in some part of China. What is your explanation on this, Tan Sri?
Well, first of all, my first thing I want to share is that COVID-19 didn't arise out of the blue, right? COVID-19 is part and parcel of the whole disruption of our planetary health boundaries. And for those who are unaware, there are 9 parameters of planetary health boundaries that we have basically transgressed, partly because our rapid urbanization, economic growth has actually come at a very serious price for our planetary health and environmental and social health as well. So, as a result, we have a very narrowed down the distance between people and animals and wildlife and our behaviors, and therefore viruses and zoonotic diseases will be on the rise. And unfortunately, I have to say this is not the end. There are going to be more diseases like this coming in the future. So as we look into that aspect, it really, as you said, it's about resetting. It's not just resetting, ourselves in terms of economy and looking at, having a really close look at how businesses will change in the future. One that is more of digital, technology-based, less contact, and recognizing some industries may never recover or will take a longer time to recover, but also resetting at individual corporate policy levels in government as well. What is our adaptation to the current challenges we have in the disruption of our planetary boundaries? How do we do business differently? What do we move towards to make sure that we are protecting the environment? We're making sure that urbanization is well planned, that access and social justice is there as well. So there are many different economic models that we can look like. It's a big question mark. Is GDP the best measure of our growth? Should we not be looking into other sustainable economic models, like whether you call it a circular economy or donut economy or sustainable economic models? So these are big questions we need to start identifying and addressing, not just at a national level, but also at local levels as well. And I think at a global level as well, to have a look at, what does it look like to have a world and a planet that's safer, that's more just, that has more equity and accessibility.
So in relation to that, we were talking about Green Deal in many parts of the world now. What does it mean by Green Deal? Is that something that we are more concerned about environment, or we are more sustainable in nature? How can we explain that from the pandemic perspective?
Well, first of all, from the pandemic perspective, it's a reflection that we haven't done well on our green deals, right? Because we have not taken into consideration maybe the three factors that we often refer to as ESG, environmental, social, good governance. The second thing is, how has our pandemic response been? When I look back at this last year, yes, our goal is to rapidly save lives, protect lives, but I shudder to think about the repercussions of our actions on actually the environmental impact that we have, with a lot of single-use disposables that are not biodegradable. Are we creating another disaster at the same time? And the other thing, of course, is with the Green Deal is really our shift towards critical things, our energy utilization, transportation and mobility. These are critical things. Our protection of environment, our waters, our forests, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, indirectly, you are saying that if you have a proper control of our environment, especially in the context of planetary health, the spread of that kind of diseases will not be as worldwide, or it will contain in some locality instead of spreading or transferring from wild ecosystem into human ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that whether or not it's going to shift it immediately, I think is to be seen. But what we do know is if we don't start now, it will just make the situation worse, and probably the gap between one pandemic to the other will not be 100 years. It may be 50 years, it may be 20 years. So we might see a rise in zoonotic diseases that cause widespread, pandemics and disruption.
The early part of this, sorry, Dato Seri, I would like to concentrate on this question. The early part of COVID-19 pandemic, you were at the Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in Geneva as Under Secretary General of the partnerships. So you must have some global perspective when it started. So can you share with us?
Yeah, I think that, I always say that the COVID-19 is not just a pandemic, it's a syndemic. which means that it's a collision of many, many challenges that we have. For example, climate change. These are also things that have, a direct impact as well on our environment, our well-being, on our other syndemics like, non-communicable diseases. Malaysia, 1 in 5 people in Malaysia have diabetes, and this is a lifestyle disease because of lack of exercise, our diet, and so on and so forth. And you would have seen that the mortality from COVID-19 is higher when you have non-communicable diseases. So what I'm trying to say is that there are so many interconnected factors that just put us in such a difficult situation now, and a dire situation, I might say, in handling a crisis like this. At the Red Cross, I think what our work is, because we were in 192 countries with about 14 million volunteers, I can speak about my previous experience with other pandemics. For example, with Ebola and others, it's also from wildlife. The thing that broke the chain was not just the medical treatment, it was actually volunteers and communities participating, telling each other we need to behave in a way that's different, that actually broke the chain of transmission. This is a big missing link now. We need our rakyat in Malaysia to really step up, remind each other that, because if we don't alter our behaviors, the virus needs a host. We are the host. If we start to get fed up of the public health measures that we've been advised and continue to mingle and not keep our distance, and now worst of all, we've learned that the virus is already aerosol transmitted, which means it can be transmitted through the air. Wearing a mask, in fact, some people say wear a double mask even, or surgical mask. Our behaviors are going to determine how we're going to come out of this.
Okay, thank you, Tan Sri. As a former minister and known as Mr. Fix-It in business transformation, Dato Idris, could you describe the present business scenario and what can be done?
I think let's look at the time frame first, because I think this is not something that will go away just a short period of time. So I think there's 4 to 5 years. That's what the window we're looking at. The reason why I put in a 4 to 5 year period for us to eradicate this virus is because there are 7.7 billion people in the world that you have to vaccinate. The process to do that is not a simple thing. So that's one. Let's put that aside. Now you have to look at businesses. How businesses have to deal with this. There are 3 types of businesses that have to deal with it. The first is the businesses that are really unable to cope and survive. And some of these, they will have to figure out how to maybe close down and reopen. I call it the mothball strategy. I mean, for example, if it goes on for 4 or 5 years, an airline simply cannot continue to go. There may be people who will say, I close down the airline now, I reset it 4 years from today. It's called the mothball strategy. The other one is, most businesses are single product. The single product businesses, they can diversify. They do something else that's less impacted by COVID-19. And this is very, very important to start doing this. And the third one is to really now reinvent yourself. For example, if you are a retail mall, your retail shop, if you're not allowed to open your shop today, obviously you can sell your product via Amazon, you can sell your product via Lazada, and etc. You can absolutely grow your business in that area. And so I would say today, many businesses have to completely transform and change themselves. I give you one very good example. There's one Kelantanese guy by the name of Nick Sazwan. He runs a small company called Ciriatone. Long before COVID-19, he's already adopted a model that he doesn't want to sell his product via a retail store. He just wants to sell it via e-commerce. This man and his wife, they've been able to sell all the products to 75 countries around the world. His product is guitar amplifier, because he's such a passionate, he's a very passionate Kelantanese. So if you buy his guitar amplifier, it's not made in Malaysia, Dato Seri, it is made in Kelantan. This factory is here, but if you key in on YouTube, key in Ciriatone, one word, you will see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos by people who have bought his product and say he's fantastic. And that's how it is sold. So his selling is not through a marketing manager. It is sold via YouTube. The customer saying this is the best, it's better than the German amplifiers, better than the British amplifiers, because cost is only half. So I give that example because this is not a big company. This company is just husband and wife, and plus, I think 20 over welders, electronics that put it all together. And it can be done by small people, not necessarily the realm of big. So and I use this example because I'm not talking theory. Then we're talking some real stuff here. And so I think if we were to get people to really think about reinventing themselves, so that's the reinvention strategy. The first one is mothball strategy. The other one's the second, the diversification strategy to do the businesses that are not really impacting yourself. And as I said, the last one is about reinventing yourself, embracing the technology. So I think, yeah.
Dato Seri, what if the company is too big? You have loan to serve, to service, and then, I mean, assuming you have Malaysian Airlines, for example.
Right. So when I say reinvent yourself, that also include shrinking. That means reducing your cost is one way of survival. That means you have to cut your costs in every aspect. You may have to reduce manpower. You may have to reduce, you may have to do salary cuts to go and to size it. Otherwise, you cannot survive. And so these are necessary things. There's a very simple tool that we use called ESA, E-S-S-A. E means to eliminate unnecessary processes within the company. I would encourage every company today, take this opportunity to look at all your internal process, eliminate unnecessary one. Then after you've eliminated them, you then simplify the process. The ones process that are relevant, you simplify them. Instead of 100 steps, make it 10 steps. After you've simplified it, the next S is to standardize it so that the various departments and different business units don't go and do their own thing. Then you have common way of doing it, common template, common approaches. And the last A is called to automate it. You only automate something that have gone through ESA, E-S-S-A. And if you automate a rubbish process, then the output is also no good. So I always tell people, in a crisis like this, do not waste the opportunity. People will know it's necessary to do ESA. I believe it is a must for every company to go through an ESA process while you are still on a lockdown. You can really address this.
As Secretary General of Ministry of Environment and Water, I'm very interested to know about the green growth perspective. And we have also Harvard Business School Alumni Club of Malaysia that's sponsoring this event. So they might be interested to know what kind of green growth trajectory or pathways that they can do by using ESA. Probably Tan Sri can start first on that.
Yeah, maybe I want to react to what Dato Sri Idris said, in which I completely agree. But the other thing I want to highlight is that it's extremely important to move into digital tech, e-commerce, and so forth. We need to create the infrastructure to do that because we living in the Klang Valley are very privileged. So we've got to make sure that there's a greater mass of population that has access to this. And being a member of the Economic Action Council, I can tell you that there's a big digital vision that's being laid out. And how do we get to that state where Malaysia becomes a country that the economic drivers must be, driving towards that digital vision, must be towards, Malaysians getting into high income jobs and so on and so forth. But let's go back to the COVID-19 and business. We've seen the terrible consequences of very poor rights, the rights of our foreign workers, for example, not being met in terms of housing and so on and so forth. So let's go back to basic fundamental well-being of staff. And as a result, we've had massive outbreaks in some of the factories, and as a result, they mingle with communities, and therefore, whether they're foreign or non-foreign, they it's the behaviors. It's not the factory. It's the behaviors after work, where they sleep, where they eat and socialize. So I think this is a big wake-up call. Are we employing the right people? Why don't we up the salaries so that we can how do we shift towards also many more Malaysians being able to, fulfill some of these jobs as well? I'm not anti-foreign workers, but if we're having an unemployment rate that is so high now, what is our goal? What is our strategy to make sure that Malaysians are also able to take on some of these fundamental roles? But, equally, employers need to raise salaries and standards of living of all workers. So these are some of the things, and the huge opportunities. You talk about, moving towards green growth. I mentioned energy. I mentioned about, mobility. So these are the main drivers, right? But also, if you look at, if I was a glove manufacturer, yes, when I speak to them, they do make biodegradable gloves or whatever at premium costs. We have to demand that we utilize these green sort of products, because it will not only protect us, but it also protects the environment and the long-term consequences. So I think it's about educating the public as well, that you need to make these choices, right? Whether it is what you buy, what you eat, even that will actually drive the whole change. So it's really that paradigm mindset shift that needs to happen.
Dato Seri Idris, when we talk about business transformation, we often talk about a reducing number of people, and yet in the situation that we are now facing, we need more jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't always talk about manpower reduction as the only way forward. I really gave the example that businesses can shift gear, and give you some numbers. Last year alone, if you look at Amazon, they recorded 34% increase in their global sales. They have reached $330 billion of sales. In fact, Alibaba, in one day in November, they already achieved $74 billion of sales. And because people have now figured out it's much better to buy via the internet. So the opportunity today arises for so many of the businesses to change their approach, to then consider growth as a big trajectory for them. In the past, if you have one store, you only in the Klang Valley, you only expected people within Klang Valley to come to the store. But now if you have a virtual store, all the countries in the world can buy from you. And so this is the key. And plus, I would say today, there are many tools available on the internet. Jungle Scout is one tool. If you use Jungle Scout's tool, Jungle Scout will tell you if you are manufacturing glass, for example, it will show you who else is buying glass, selling glass, and what price in that day. So you say this is your product. The best seller is from USA. They say this is their brand, and this is how much they sell it. You can pull that every single day at what price, so you know. And also you get out there on a daily basis complaints from customers. What are they saying, complaining about your glass? What is it they don't like about your glass? Why is it they like it? So those information are on your fingertips today. So what businesses need to do is when you go digital, it's not about just opening a portal. It's about using this as a tool, mining the data and looking at competition and making changes in your product to beat the competition. So this is the details that you got to go through. So if you use tools like Jungle Scout, you will be able to mine the data of the competition. You will also get customer response. Then you can reinvent your product today. So I think, to my mind, this is a great opportunity for Malaysia to leap forward on the digital front. It cannot just be done by government sitting alone by themselves, doing all the infrastructure, but businesses must come along. Businesses must come along and say, I want to now come out and do this and take this opportunity. Rather than cry about COVID-19, we now say this is an opportunity that has forced us to reinvent business.
I would like to send an article in Foreign Affairs magazine that I read some time ago. and this is by Francis Fukuyama. It's very famous scholar in this, and he wrote about the pandemic and the political order. So in this situation, normally we need a stable political system, stable government. But looking at Malaysia, I mean, many places in the world, not only Malaysia, we are still facing issues with political instability. In the USA, for example. What is your take on this, Tan Sri? Probably you have something to share with us. I'm not political, but we have to address it. Otherwise, people say that we are.
Absolutely. I think that's the elephant in the room, right? I think that if you are going to manage a pandemic, it has to be a non-political approach. It has to be based on evidence and science. It has to be all parties coming to the table to say, okay, we've got this problem. What are each and everyone's roles? And I think this is where I'm saying a collaborative approach is going to be very, very critical. So, you know, I want to also reiterate again, the management of a pandemic is not 100% medical. The very great component is social behavior, and that's people. And you have to be able to do that, and you can only succeed when you're in an environment of trust. And we are not having that environment of trust, and therefore everything is being questioned or ridiculed. So I think that it's so important now, you know, my appeal to everyone is, please, can we put everything aside and really focus on ending this pandemic? Can we protect each other within our own circles of influence, our own circles of concern, that we drive this message that, you know, no one is safe till everyone is safe. We have to change our behaviors. That is going to end the pandemic transmission. It's not just, you know, our health interventions. And of course, there is a vaccine coming, which is going to be very, very critical for us to be able to move forward on this. So I think, you know, politics is extremely important. Political stability is important, but also political collaboration. I think, you know, the rakyat deserve more, right? They deserve more from all political leaders to really come together now and support, you know, the health ministry, other agencies to make sure that we do drive for success in this. I want to come back to one point though, Dato Sri. You mentioned about what happens if there's more automation and therefore less jobs. Well, maybe something to think out of the box is it time for us to start looking at universal basic income? And therefore giving you know, our people the opportunity then to derive more income and so forth through their own innovative approaches, the things that were mentioned by Dato Sri Idris about, you know, their own entrepreneurship, right? I was very struck by the World Economic Forum report, which said that 65% of children in school today, in primary school, will work in jobs that don't exist yet. So what are we, so I want to go back to the fundamentals of what do we teach children today? Do we teach them the, you know, usual stuff in curriculum, or do we go the Finn way, right? Which is about values, empathy, problem-solving abilities, collaboration, communication, networking. Because these are going to be the essential skills that will help us navigate, you know, the 21st, 22nd century.
Dato Idris, you were in cabinet, Malaysian cabinet. You must have some political assessment on what is happening now. So to what extent we want to make sure that our political stability can drive our preparation, our resilience in facing this pandemic?
I can tell you, political instability is highly distracting for leaders in government. So if a government is very fragile, they have great difficulty focusing on the substance, because survival for them is a political thing. What we have today, Tan Sri Jemilah is absolutely right, that in dealing with this pandemic, we have to follow evidence and science. In fact, my team and I, under PEMANDU, we've been working with MOSTI. We've developed the Global COVID Index, the GCI. And using this Global COVID Index, we have been able to rank on a daily basis, Dato Sri, 180 over countries on data and facts, which is number 1, which is number 180. We've got the full endorsement by WHO. So Malaysia is currently ranked number 54, you know. And if you take a look at the UK is ranked 142. The US is ranked 154. So you see the numbers there. We are not very good, but we are compared to many other countries. You know, that's quite good, number 54. But I must say that what we did was, Tan Sri Jemilah is involved. She's one of the key champions for this work. We then studied the top 20 countries. What are they doing among the top 20 countries that made them successful in fighting this pandemic? And we found in all the top 20 countries, we found 7 things that they were doing right. Let me quickly mention what they were. The first one that they were doing right, and the top one, that despite the political difficulties, they were focusing on those things and they're not distracted. The first one is the approach on testing. Testing you have to do, really rigorous, and you have to focus on testing. Contact tracing, absolutely key that you need to do. The lockdown, people must implement the lockdown. It's very clear in the NCO, what we call it. Once you are easing it down, there's a method of easing it down, not simply do. You ease your lockdown state by state, depending on whether the data shows they are ready to lock down. And then communication and engagement to the public. Those are the 5 interventions. Now, Tan Sri did mention behavioral, public behavior, which is the 6th thing, compliance, changes in behavior. You can have a lockdown, people don't follow you, and nothing happens. Whatever government say, if people don't comply with the procedures, nothing will happen. It is absolutely key. You know, some countries do it by force, by putting a law to do it. Some countries don't have to do it by force. They don't put a law like that to it, but they simply comply. But compliance is key, and of course leadership. Leadership is very important, the 7th. And these are not by any particular order, but leadership is key. So if you've got the right leadership, I return to the question of politics. Whether you're fragile government politically or not, if you want to fight this COVID-19, there's no if, no but. You got to do these 7 things. You got to do them all together, and you got to focus. So I think it's important to have a very stable government, because then people will focus on these 7 things rather than they get distracted. If you get distracted, nothing will happen. I would say the distractions in the US was massive. And that was what led to the downfall of Donald Trump. He had huge distraction. Many of them were self-inflicted. He caused them to happen, and the distractions was massive. And he was not focusing on the things that matter. And so many days, every single day on CNN, everybody was telling him what he should be doing. Fauci was telling him what he should be doing, but he's not doing it. So leadership is key. And you look in New Zealand, I mean, fantastic. The leadership is really clear. And you look at some of the countries, you know, that they're doing really, really well. Iceland is doing very well. And in fact, fortunately, when you look at them, quite a number of the ladies who are running governments have done a massive job. So Tan Sri Jemilah is a fantastic. You guys are probably going to take a big thing in the resetting of the world post-pandemic.
So the resetting will be more on women in the leadership.
Sorry, Dato Sri, without a doubt, feminine leadership is very different. Feminine leadership is empathetic. It's not, you know, women generally are not egoistic, and you know they will get on and do the work because we are used to juggling multiple chores at one time. I'm not saying that male leaders are not good. I think that every leader needs to be able to do that. But again, how do we drive collaboration? Because at the end of the day, if we don't get control of the pandemic, businesses will continue to fail and struggle, and people will not be able to put food on the table. So, I'm extremely worried. I don't care about, economic parameters. I care that people get food on the table and children go back to school. So I think that, these are the real challenges that we face. And until each and every one of us commits to changing our behaviors, we can't get there.
Yeah.
Dato Seri, there is a saying, this is a Swedish proverb, saying that don't complain about lack of wind, learn to sail. It means that we have to find ways and means to handle the situation. If you, I mean, I'm very passionate, like Tan Sri Jemilah as well, to travel to Scandinavia. There is nothing too special about them. I mean, 6 or 7 months of the year, they are in very cold situation, no sunlight, no everything, but they perceive that they are very happy people, and yet on paper, they are considered the happiest people in the world, the highest income per capita. You name it, what kind of parameters or indicators you want to measure people, they are mostly top 10. In, say, for example, in Sustainable Development Index, they are all of them top 10 for many years. So, as someone from Kapit, probably you can we can learn from you. What are your secrets to be in Shell for 23 years, and then you are managing quite a number of projects?
Oh, by the way,
say for example.
By the way, I don't come from Kapit. It's Barrio.
Barrio.
Anyway, there's the key here is this: you have to say you make the most of what you have. There's another saying: don't curse the darkness, introduce the light. The darkness is the COVID-19. Introduce the light. So you make the most of what you have. You don't say, well, I wish I had this, and if I didn't have that. So really, I mean, focusing on what you have, and that's how you then move forward. The other thing is setting very clear priorities. Tan Sri made a comment. For her, the priority is put food on the table, bringing our children back to school. That kind of ruthless prioritization is needed. If you want to make success out from anything, if you don't understand prioritization, you'll never be a champion. You know, I had the opportunity to meet up with Usain Bolt when he was here. You know, I met up with him, and we also met up with Sebastian Coe. And Sebastian Coe, you know, a middle distance runner, a very fantastic guy. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jack Ma. I met all these guys. And you know what they say? Every single one of them, Carl Lewis also I met. They say, if you want to be world champion and you want to succeed in anything, you have to be absolutely focused. Prioritization. The word is ruthless prioritization. And the more you are focused on what is really important, the more likely you will succeed in what the chosen area. So people who are average is want to do everything, and they don't have time to do all of that. So if you pick a few areas and really focus on it, you will absolutely succeed. Take a look, you mentioned the Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian countries are the only countries in the world who have adopted an economic model that is, in my mind, economically sustainable. Their debt to GDP level is the most sustainable among all countries. The US, their national debt in the US is more than 100% of their GDP. Even Singapore's debt is already more than 100% of their GDP. And Europe, take Eurozone alone altogether, more than 94%. Their debt is 94% of their GDP. And so the only countries, other than the group of countries that are successfully manage it with very low debt, it is the top ones are Scandinavia. Why are they able to do it? Because they've been able to focus on a very few things. If you look at Sweden or Switzerland, we all know they make excellent watches, but they absolutely focus on making good watches. And everybody know that you want to, Swiss watches is the gold standard. Really focus in a specific area, and they do it well. And so they also are putting a lot of money on health. You know, the public health is working very well. And by the way, what they do there is that the tax rates are very high. But people are prepared to give the money to government, high taxes. You know why? 70% of the taxes that are paid in Scandinavia is to the local community. That means in the original district. So 70% are in the particular district. So if I live in Damansara, Kota Damansara, my taxes, I can see 70% of the taxes will be for the potholes in Damansara, not for something in Kelantan I cannot see. Then only the remaining will go to the federal government. So what they're doing is they're very transparent in their tax approach. and people can see, and it's visible to the way in which they do it. So I'm not saying that's the way to do it. I'm just, the principle is there must be accountability to how we will tax and how we will spend the money, and people are prepared to pay much heavier taxes. I say that money don't grow on trees. If you want good public transport, you have to prepare tax. The problem with Malaysia is we want first-class facilities, but we don't want to pay for it. No taxes. The whole of Malaysia, 30 million people, only 1.5 million pay tax, you know.
Yeah. Tan Sri, we have question, Dato Sri, from viewers. When are we going to get our vaccine?
Yeah, I answered that in the chat. Well, first of all, Malaysia has taken a step where we really want to make sure that any vaccine that is given to our people is safe and efficacious. So this is extremely important. Therefore, we have to go through the rigorous approval process from our NPRA, a National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Authority. So we will be expecting our first shipment very soon, towards the end of February. In fact, today as we speak, they are doing a trial run of the whole logistics exercise in Balaga in Sarawak. And then they will be doing other sort of trials as well. Now, the vaccine portfolio we have also procured is quite broad. So it's Pfizer, a number of other brands, but the first shipment will be Pfizer. And as soon as each of these is on a rolling transmission now are approved, we will be able to bring them in quickly. The first phase will be really targeting frontliners because they are extremely high risk. And then after that will be vulnerable populations, people above a certain age with comorbidities and so on and so forth. So it will take time because vaccine production is in high demand. And therefore we will have to, obviously there's a queue, but the hope is that by end of this year, we will have vaccinated about 85% of our population. And for us to achieve the herd immunity, we will need to vaccinate about 70% or more.
70% or more, that will be end of this year, 85%. So when are we going to...
Our aim is to achieve 85% by the end of the year. But to achieve the immunity, the herd immunity that we want, we need to at least immunize 70%.
Okay.
Hopefully by third quarter.
Yeah, Dato Seri Idris, what is the 5 big fast results that we need now on top of vaccination?
The first one, I think it's very important that government now take this opportunity to make really good use of a collaborative approach to move into the digital front. So I believe digital is a way forward. No choice. And absolutely key. Government and businesses must come together that we Education is absolutely key. We have to find a way how to make sure that we can educate people much more virtually, because already the tools are available internationally. I mean, so digital front. And the second one is on health side, we have to, post-pandemic, we really have to do primary healthcare a lot more, preventive measures. Tan Sri made mention of the fact that a lot of Malaysians are already suffering from non-communicable diseases such as diabetes. This is our lifestyle. We are not doing enough on primary healthcare. A lot of what we do in Malaysia is secondary healthcare. When you're sick, you then go and do it. So, and the third one is about changing the way in which we allow the workforce to be ready for a world beyond, the new work for the future. And that means skilling people, so that we talked about it before. In the world of the future, what we teach them today may become redundant in the world, so that talent, the way in which we change talent and the training involved. That's the fifth aspect that is needed today is dealing with this crisis right now. Totally focus on the things that needs to be done today. If you think about the 4,000 people that infected daily, that number is very big to me. We have to really bring in and flatten the curve down.
Okay, Dato Seri again, what about sectors like construction, manufacturing? We require a lot of people. We cannot open that very easily. So in the short period of time, say until a year or two from now, well, what should be our way forward or strategy or something?
those business construction, actually a large chunk, 90% of the workers in the construction sector are foreign. And Tan Sri is right. If you look at how they are housed in the construction site, it's really a lot to be desired. So it's a lot improvement. So we can automate many of them, construction work. A lot of that is building material, all of this prefab material. A lot of changes can be done in the way in which we do that. And so I would say today automation is a way forward. But again and again, people feel threatened by this. If you automate it, and eventually people will have no job because machines will do it. But it doesn't mean that you can shift into other areas. You can start doing many things like Apple, for example. Apple does not have to manufacture all the parts. The parts are manufactured all over in China and other places. So the people that are making the money is actually the guys who own the IP to design the product, but they don't actually manufacture it. They outsource the manufacturing elsewhere, but the big money is in that. So Malaysia can jump into this, what we call the knowledge economy. The knowledge economy, we control the knowledge and therefore we design the system, but the manufacturing can be done elsewhere. So that means Malaysia has to jump into a very different economy in the future.
From humanitarian perspective, Tan Sri, we need to help people who are not having enough money to put food on table. So what is your advice?
I mean, these are the very difficult challenges that the government is facing, right? How much of our social protection measures that we need to put in place. And I think, whether we like it or not, we have to find a way because, but it's not just government. I think, all society, those of us who, the corporate sector, people, public citizens, I think we all have to dig deep now and support people who really need our help right now. I mean, today, I just got news that the numbers are skyrocketing today. Where we are not over the hump yet. We really need to all come together now. Otherwise, we can't beat this.
Okay, I would like to conclude our discussion. I'm so sorry, it's about 1 hour discussion now. By coming back to the article by Francis Fukuyama on the pandemic and political order. So this is very important. The first sentence he mentioned, major crises have major consequences, usually unforeseen. The Great Depression spurred isolation, nationalism, fascism, and World War II, but also led to the New Deal, the rise of the United States as a global superpower, and eventually decolonization. The question is, what's about this pandemic? Are we going to have that massive destruction and going to have a new deal altogether? What is your take on this? I start with Dato Sri Idris.
I think the world is not going to have a new deal in just like that. Simply the reason why I don't think so is this. It's very difficult in my mind to see how the world will pull together to really deal with this. And unfortunately, we will go through a period that I call it stumbling through. It will take a period of stumbling through quite a number of years before we come and see something, a semblance of I call it a new deal for the world. If you wanted to a new deal for the world, it requires really solid leadership at the very top, the top countries coming together and say, look, really we have to do, I have not seen it. The way in which you're doing it today. If you wanted to see this even from a WHO perspective, we have to equip WHO with a lot of authority and power to have the ability to pull countries together and do this. I think today it is going to be, I'm going to look after my case, and then I will see if I can help others. The new deal for the global world, I am quite pessimistic about it. But I think we will muddle through it and we'll make some good out of it. But that's my realistic assessment of what I think is whether this new deal for the world is going to come. I don't think it's going to come in a very short period of time. It's muddling through.
What about you, Tan Sri?
I think that, I have to agree with Dato Sri Idris, but I also think that, hopefully with the new administration in the US, things might change. I don't know, maybe it will. But I also think that, let's not wait for global changes. At national level, what can we do better? How can, the political leadership, across all parties come together and really try to address this together? That's one. And I completely agree that, it has to be a deal, whether it's at national level or whatever. The second thing is at the regional level, we're not doing enough at the regional level. Why is it that we're not coming together, say as ASEAN states, to look at what are the needs here? My biggest fear now is with vaccines. The rich countries are buying more than they need. Yeah. And, we said no one is safe till everyone is safe. Where are we going to even get our vaccines if everything's been monopolized by the US, the UK, the European Union? Where is the chance for the less developed world to get this? Will we have, almost like an apartheid that, only people who have a vaccine certificate can travel and do business when the developed world or the developing world does not have that access? So I think there are fundamental, values that are lost. And I think, that resetting that we have to do is not just about business resetting. I think it calls for fundamental values resetting in humanity. And who will lead that charge? I think it's young people. I think young people need to now lead and get their voices heard and demand a change.
Dato Sri Idris, your concluding remarks, 2 minutes.
Very simple. We must not despair, despite how tough it is. Don't curse the darkness, but introduce the light. Tan Sri, I totally agree with her. We can do what we have to do. Individually, we can do it. So the question today is that for Malaysia, I mean, it's so scary that the numbers are going up. We know how to do it. We've been there before. We've done it in MCO1. And so if everybody have done it before, then you know what happened in MCO1? We were all very scared, Dato Sri. We were all very scared of this. But now when we have MCO2, I said, well, I'm not too scared of it and I'm going to do normal. People are not washing their hands and not doing many things. So quite a lot of problems today exist because compliance isn't there. So but I think having done that, we have to individually look at what you can do most during this time. My team and I, we were doing completely different things. I told the guys, we cannot do consultancy. But people can cry. I said, look, we cannot consult the countries, we cannot do it. So we brought all of our staff from all over the world back to Malaysia. You know what we wanted to do? We started to do modeling, programming, to create the global COVID index. So I told them, anybody in our team that can do programming, let's do it within 1 month. I want to produce a global COVID index that can rank all the 100 countries in the world every single day, 10,000 data points. And we could do it, and we were able to do it. And rather than sit down there and cry about it, but we then said, let's rise above what we needed to do, reinvent the wheels. In fact, my team and I, we are into solid waste management. We've sold units now. We have a team in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. We have now closed one entire landfill. The entire landfill is now closed because the units that we put out there, we now take all the rubbish, put them in through there. We don't use energy. And this product is actually an invention of Malaysia. And the product is called Corina. My point is this, I give examples because otherwise we become theory. I think today we must say, what can I do in my work, in my businesses, in my country that will make the difference?
Okay, Tan Sri, 1 minute. Tan Sri, we don't have much time.
I think my appeal is that don't just look at numbers, look at what you can do. I think there's a lot we can do, and it starts with us. We can end this pandemic. We've got to now influence those around us. We've got to change our behaviors. We really got to help. Think about the frontline workers who are struggling, who are overworked, who are depressed. We can't keep building hospitals. That does not solve the problem if people don't change their behaviors.
So with that, I would like to thank both panelists, both of them from our conversation. You can see their strength, their contribution. I personally did not plan to giving their resume or CV because I think all Malaysians should know them. and by talking to them, we know what they are doing at the moment. I would like to thank Astro Awani. We have about 6,000 viewers, Tan Sri, yeah, through our media that we have. And I would like also to thank my colleagues from the Ministry and Harvard Business School Alumni Club of Malaysia for sponsoring this event. For those who are participating in the discussion and listening to us, thank you again. We will plan for another discussion in the future about COVID-19 and what can we do from various perspectives. And see you again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.